Hundreds of masked white nationalists march in Washington on 4th of July. So while people are shooting off fireworks, eating, drinking, celebrating, this is what's going on in Washington. So take a look at all these members. This is a white supremacist group. So the members, they were on the Metro bus in Washington, D.C. on Saturday. They were having a rally. They're a neo-fascist group, and they go by the name Patriot Front. They paraded their banners, including Confederate flags. They chanted "Reclaim America" in the U.S. Capitol, and hundreds of masked men carrying banners, including the Confederate flag, marched through Washington, D.C. on the 4th of July, the 250th anniversary of the U.S.'s inception. So the group appeared to be led by Thomas Russell, who is the founder of the neo-fascist white supremacist organization called Patriot Front. Members of the group wore white masks and gathered in front of the DC's Union Station, and they later marched towards the Capitol Hill. This was reported by a WTOP. So members, they chanted "Life, Liberty, and Victory" and "Reclaim America" during the Saturday demonstration, according to the video posted on social media. So images published by the Reuters also showed mass members riding the DC Metro as other riders, they looked on warily. So you can see in the still frame, there's the Confederate flags waved, the way they were dressed, the way their faces are covered. And let me tell you, these are like doctors, lawyers, police officers, judges, people that have some decent jobs. That's the reason why their faces are covered, because they don't want you to see who they are, because it is a threat to their occupation and whatever status that they hold. Some of them probably work in politics. Some of them are probably wanting to be elected as political officials. Some of them are probably your bosses. They probably lead certain organizations and you wouldn't even know it. That is why their faces are covered. So the white supremacist group gathered attracted some counter protesters as well. So in the video, a man with a bullhorn shouted at Patriot Front members, "Every single one of you justifies the fucking right to abortion." So in a comment shared on Politico on Saturday's march, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department said it was tracking the First Amendment activities that occurred this morning in the Eastern Market neighborhood, adding MPD recognizes the right of individuals to peacefully express their views and remains committed to maintaining public safety and security for D.C. residents and visitors alike. So this is another still frame, and it's also not really still, but you can see what's going on. I think there's some sound to it. Masked men, they ride. Let me turn it up. Okay, so that's what you see. So asked about white nationalists marching in Washington, the U.S. Secretary of Interior, Doug Burgum, told CNN's State of the Union on Saturday that what they stand for is nothing I could possibly agree with, but one of the foundational principles of the United States, which makes democracy messy, is free speech. So members of the Patriot Front were last seen marching during the Memorial Day weekend at Virginia Beach Oceanfront. Local affiliate 13 News now reported. So the Patriot Front was founded in 2017 following the deadly Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. If anybody can remember what happened there, it was a tragedy. So the neo-fascist hate group has gained visibility over the years as those connected with the white supremacy organization have been widely embraced by the Trump administration. So in 2022, the expert on extremist groups told The Guardian Patriot Front's fundraising and mobilizing efforts resemble those of the media production company. So no other white supremacist group operating in the U.S. today is able to match Patriot Front's ability to produce media, ability to mobilize across the country, ability to finance as well. Morgan Moon, an investigative researcher with the ADI Center of Extremism, said. So that's what makes them a particular concern. So again, like what I said, these are like lawyers, doctors. They're probably politicians that are in there, police officers, people who are making really good money. So that's the reason why they're more able to travel, they're more able to use social media and to gain a wide variety of notoriety in many places with other financial support, because a lot of them are financially stable. And so you can tell they're not in a situation where they're like a poor little old group and they've organized and they just are shouting hateful words. These people actually have some level of power in society, and their faces are covered because they don't want that jeopardized, because that's how they're able to make these laws and go to court every week to try to overturn things. So don't think that this is going to go away anytime soon. So no other white supremacist group operating in the U.S. today is able to match Patriot Front's ability to produce media, ability to mobilize across the country, and an ability to finance. That's an important statement. Morgan Moon, an investigator researcher with ADI Center on Extremism, said. So that's what makes them a particular concern. So most recently, Patriot Front's leader claimed to be a part of the relief efforts following the deadly flood in Central Texas last year. Saturday's march comes as Trump condemned a supposed communist menace in America in a deeply partisan speech to kick off celebrations of the U.S. 250th birthday. So the White House did not respond to the Guardian's request for comment about Trump's condemning the latest march that just happened. So it says, going on, that's pretty much the article. So I can go back up so you can see that this just happened this weekend. This is not fake news. This is not old news. This is real news. And this is what happened. And they did happen to show them on the news briefly, but it didn't last very long. But they showed them on the news. I believe it was on, NBC. Some of the news outlets briefly showed this on the news. Now, while everybody was celebrating, this was what was going on in Washington. And so this is a celebration of white supremacy. That's what 4th of July really is. Not to take away from the excitement of people being with family and having a day off, taking advantage of the sales. I mean, those are outside things. Those are like human things. If you can get some food that's a lot cheaper, if you can like sit down and relax because you've worked all week, I don't see anything wrong with that. But the whole premise of 4th of July is not a good thing for everyone. And looking at this, it just pretty much validates that. I don't see anything wrong with people eating, being with family, and having a good time and enjoying themselves. Just having that day a break away. But if you really think about it, this is not a really joyous occasion to celebrate a holiday in particular. I would just scrap all of the other things that people are talking about and just say, oh, I'm just really more celebrating being with my family, not 4th of July. And so I would change everything in my own family and say, look, I'm just going to celebrate having some time off from work. I'm going to celebrate the fact that I'm living to see another day. I'm going to celebrate the fact that I'm able to sit and eat with my family members and see that they're still here and they're alive and well, but I'm not celebrating 4th of July. That's the way I would look at it. But that's me. And that's my opinion. The other thing that was concerning is this right here. The war in Gaza. It is worse than ever before. And you see extreme poverty, famine, and terror. And it's a genocide going on over there. And it is not pretty at all. It is horrible. Starvation, extreme starvation, extreme poverty. And so the nightmare in Gaza is more than a humanitarian crisis. It is a crisis of humanity. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, the war has severely impacted the already critical humanitarian situation in Gaza Strip, adversely affecting 2.1 million residents. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, the UNDP Administrator Achim Steiner, continue to call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the release of all the hostage protection for civilians, and a full access for desperately needed humanitarian aid. Civilians, particularly women and children, have borne the brunt of the war's carnage, with more than 42,000 killed and more than 96,000 are injured. 3/4 of the population depend on food assistance, and too many of the most vulnerable have already died from starvation. The UNDP's Programming of Assistance the Palestinian people is working alongside humanitarian partners to provide immediate support in Gaza. UNDP's support to the ongoing humanitarian response initially focuses on the provision of clean water, emergency employment, medical supplies, solid waste removal. As the war continues, the humanitarian need increase. This work is expanding to support civil society organizations and micro, small, and medium enterprises. The UNDP is also working on ways to provide dignified temporary shelter, scaling up emergency employment opportunities, expanding its support to solid waste management, and preparing for the massive task of debris removal and management. Despite being driven from their homes, living in squalid conditions, and grieving unimaginable loss, as well as destruction of family homes, places of worship, universities, and hospitals, Palestinians in Gaza continue to survive with dignity and hope for a better future. So there's snippets of the voices of some of the people in videos of people, even though they're going through some of the most horrific situations, they're hoping for a better tomorrow. A journalist's journey through war, loss, and unyielding hope. My own time that I used to cry living in a shelter during the Gaza war. So there's many stories down here and so on. Life in Gaza under war through Ayman's eyes. Ayman responsibilities have grown as her usual team of 57 people now include their dependents and sheltering in place. And so it is not good over there, folks. So don't believe what they're telling you that they have food and water. They don't. They're in so much need of food and water, and they're almost down to the bare minimum of nothing, if not nothing. And so you see these right here, very concerning situations right here, is telling you that new UN report impacts the war have set back development in Gaza by as much as 69 years. So it is really bad. The joint statement here, OCHA, UNDP, UNFPA, UNICEF, UNOPS, UNRWA, WFP, and the WHO on fuel shortage. So the United Nations warns that the fuel shortage in Gaza has reached critical levels. Without adequate fuel, Gaza faces a collapse in humanitarian efforts. There is more to read in that. It's just giving you other related articles about how bad things are. So as the war in Gaza enters the 7th month, 1.74 million people in Palestinian people will be pushed into poverty across the state of Palestine, according to the United Nations assessment. As the war in Gaza approaches the 7th month, the poverty rate in the state of Palestine continues to escalate, reaching 58.4%, thrusting nearly 1.74 million people into poverty. And so Gaza war expects its socio-economic impacts on the state of Palestine, and poverty in the state of Palestine set to soar more than a third if war continues for a second month. It's really, really bad over there. So anybody saying that they have food, they have water, they're fine, oh, we're looking for a ceasefire, that's not what's going on over there. You just be looking at what's really happening, and you're seeing it right now. And this is not fake news. This is not AI. This is not something made up. This is what is really going on over there. It's not a bot either. These are real news articles, real things that have happened and are happening now. And there is more that I was reading yesterday, that the protections of people who are here in the U.S., a lot of those are going to be stripped. And for us black people, a lot of this has already started. The discrimination cases, they're getting rid of them, the Trump administration. So if you think I'm playing, I'll come back with that video a little later. But it is not getting better, it is getting worse. And as people are celebrating, you're celebrating your own demise and not really knowing what you're celebrating. So I think people should really stay equipped to what's going on and how it's going to affect their lives in the coming future very soon. A lot of the health care has been stripped. Millions of people have lost health care here in the U.S. That is not something to celebrate. And many more are going to lose protections. If you are under TPS protection, he is going to get rid of that. I believe it's 300,000 people are going to lose that here in the U.S. You were protected before, but you're not going to be protected in the next coming weeks. He's aiming to get rid of it and eliminate it. And for all the black people who had discrimination cases, anybody of color who had discrimination cases, those are going to be tossed out. So this 4th of July that people thought was fun, it is not fun. It is a celebration of white supremacy. That is why this group was out marching at Washington, on Washington, D.C. ground.